Even though this week's Parsha, Haazinu, is, again, relatively speaking, a short Parsha in its number of psukim, there are very long sections of Rashi here, unusual for Rashi to write at such length. And Rashi presents two entirely different versions of how to interpret the Parsha. The first one, which is the one that we would have expected, is that the Parsha refers to the Jewish people. And that, so to speak, it's a continuation of the words of Moshe that we had in Parshat Ki Tavo, where Moshe describes the Tochacha, and in Parshat Nitzavim, where Moshe again describes the results of the covenant, what will happen if the Brit is not observed. And part of it is a continuity of what we read on Shabbos in the Parsha of Vayelech, of Anochi Aster Aster Ponai Bayom Ahu, V'yoki Sikrena, Ros, Rabos, Vitzoros. So then this is a continuity of that. In the Parsha of Haazinu, Moshe again says, look what's going to happen to you at the end of days. Look what your history is going to be like. See how bitter it will be. But at the end, it'll all come right. So that's the first stream of Rashi. The first way to look at it. That it all refers to the Jewish people. Then Rashi says an interesting thing. He says that Rashi begins all over again. It isn't. He doesn't say like Dover Acher, we can say a different pshat. Rashi starts all over again, quotes the psukim again, goes through the whole thing, and he says it doesn't refer to the Jewish people, it refers to the nations of the world. It refers to humankind. And that all of these things are going to happen to them. Now, there are two ways to look at that Rashi also. Well, does Rashi mean it's going to happen to them in retribution for their behavior towards the Jewish people? In other words, that's why these events of sadness and tragedy and difficulty will occur. That's why the nations of the world will suffer it, because they did not treat the Jewish people properly. They didn't treat Torah properly. They didn't take God's word seriously. Or the second shot is that's not retribution. It's just, that's the way it's going to be. It's the way, so to speak, the world is ordained to be. And that there will always be times of trouble. There will always be times of conflict and of difficulty. And these things will happen to the nations of the world. And then the Jewish people will see what happens to the nations of the world. They'll see what humanity looks like. And so then the Jewish people will return unto Torah and unto God. And in the restoration of the Jewish people will be the restoration of the world as well. So two completely different views, but they're not that different because the result at the end is the same. However we'll interpret it, the result at the end will be the same, that the conflicts and troubles will somehow pass, and that the Jewish people will return, and that they'll be blessed, and with them will be blessed the world as well. And that's what the Lord promised Avraham Avinu, v'nivrechu v'cha kol goyei haaretz, through you Everybody is blessed, which is something we have seen throughout Jewish history, that wherever the Jews have had a chance, they have been a great boon to humankind in every field of endeavor. And only when people, their hatred overwhelms their good sense, so then they don't see it. You know, in the after the 6-Day War here, 51 years ago, so the Israeli army discovered a warehouse here in East Jerusalem. Then it was under Jordanian rule, under Jordanian territory. And in the warehouse were 50,000 portions of the Salk polio vaccine. And there was a polio outbreak in Jordan. And they had, the American government sent them, America remains a Medina Chesed, so they sent them 50,000 potions of the Salk vaccine to inject the children so that, God forbid, they should not contract polio. But the Jordanians refused to use it because it was Jewish science. It was Salk. And Salk was a Zionist, so therefore that's a double whammy, and we're not going to use it. So better, Rahman al-Islam, to have polio than to benefit from the Jews. So that's a mindset. It's a terrible mindset in the world. And so in the Parsha, Moshe comes to dispel it. He comes, so to speak to the nations of the world and tell them, look what you have here. What a treasure you have. And the Meforshim say that that's the Pshat v'yisem li Sgula mikol ha'amim. So we interpret Sgula mikol ha'amim, you are a treasure from all the nations. In other words, all the nations of the world are not a treasure, but you are a treasure. But the Meforshim say that's not necessarily the Pshat. V'yisem li Sgula, you will be a treasure mikol ha'amim, all the nations will benefit from you. The whole world will benefit from you. And that is, so to speak, your mission. That's why you're here, that the world should benefit from you. So then the age-old problem that Rashi raises here is who influences who? Did the Jewish people influence the world, or does the world influence the Jewish people? And that's a great issue. Because when the world influences the Jewish people, then it's not good for the world, and it's not good for the Jewish people either. That's that you're not fulfilling your mission. You've got it backwards. And you adopt the values of the nations of the world. That's why it says in the Torah many times, Ki toevo hi lochem. To you, it's an abomination. Why did you do that? Why did you take on the bad habits of the world? So always was a question, it's a question in every teacher faces, every educational institution faces. You have very strong students, good students, obedient students, and then you have other students. So who influences who? If you put them in a class together. And I can tell you from my experience that unfortunately it's the weaker students that influence the good students. that pervert them. So that's the problem with us too. I mean, you see what we adopt in the world. I saw an article written, and then I'm not taking a stand on this, and I'm not saying what's right or wrong, right? Because you know I never have an opinion. But the state of New York has a law that in its educational institutions and schools, you have to teach certain subjects: biology, science, English, etc., math, etc. In New York State, there are about 40,000 or 50,000 Jewish children who are mainly in the Hasidic communities, but they're also in yeshivish communities as well, who don't abide by that law. They don't offer those subjects. So now a young man that was a member of the Hasidic community and changed his mind and left everything is filed a suit in the New York Supreme Court that the court should enforce the law. And the case is going to come up for trial in a few months, and there are big lawyers on both sides, and it's a landmark case and may eventually go to the Supreme Court. So one of the defenses, so one of the things that he said is that they should integrate the student body. In other words, it doesn't have to be only Jewish kids in a Jewish school. Bring in everybody, because that's America. So in the brief that the defense attorney filed, he showed a study from the Harvard School of Education that there was an experiment like this. I don't know when or where or what, but there were 20 Hasidic kids and 20 Puerto Rican kids in one classroom. And he said the result was that the Jewish kids learned all of the curse words and all of the dirt that goes on in the world, and the Puerto Rican kids didn't get anything out of it. So that's the question: who influences whom? How does that work? And so that's what is pointed out here, I think, in the two Pshatim and Rashi. Who's influencing whom? Does it go on the Goyim or it goes on the Jews? And that's a struggle that we are all engaged in wherever we are. And Moshe poses it at the beginning of the story of our people. Rabbi Chananya ben Akashi Omer Ratza HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakos Yisrael Ficha Hirba Lahem Torah Mitzvot Shenemar Adonai Chafetz U'man Tzidkoi Agdilu Torah V'Yadil
Yizkadei Shmei V'Abba Yom Dibrakusei Yom Nichmachusei Haichon Yom Echon Hadakol Beis Yisrael Ba'Gala Zman Kariv Ilu Amen Yehei Shmei V'Abba Mavorach Olam Lo Me'omayim